the purpose of our prologue changed. Well, we were warned. We had a fellow author who expressed to us, "I can't believe you guys are doing time travel for your very first novel. If you can make it work, that'll be awesome, but I don't think you know what you're in for." Well, we are finding out just how much complication it adds to a novel. This is a spoiler episode, and in this conversation, we will be talking a little bit about our story's time travel mechanism, because that is exactly where I was stuck. I have been working on a scene for the last, it's probably been over a month or so, in between, plus or minus, with some other things we've been doing. And it's the prologue, which may feel like it's not really a crucial scene, but in this scene, this is where we introduce the person who learned about time travel from a paper and then tried to, I say time travel, really about just the mechanism of sending back just a brief message from one cell of an organ, or from one nucleus to another nucleus of a slime mold, and then tried to turn that into an ability to send back a message that a past human would be able to read. And that's really where I got stuck, trying to figure out how did this person manage to make that happen, especially since this guy is smarter than I am. And I tried a lot of common writing advice, which is, just write something, you'll figure it out as you go along. I didn't. And another set of advice was, set it aside, let it sit in the drawer for a bit, and then come back to it. Well, I set it aside, it sat in the drawer for a while, and I came back, and it's still just as stuck as ever. And this is the prologue that we've been trying to figure out.
And we finally did, just in our conversation before recording this video, we made some progress on getting unstuck, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the purpose of a prologue in general is not really to hook the reader on the story, but it's more to kind of give an idea of what the story is going to be like, to set the tone for it.
Right.
And so our novel is a science fiction novel, but the first chapter doesn't really get into any of that science fiction-y stuff at all. It's a lot of introducing the characters, setting up relationships, and things like that will eventually springboard into the science fiction, but that takes a couple chapters. And so the prologue works to give the reader an idea. There is science fiction coming. There's going to be a lot of interesting stuff as far as the science goes. There's also going to be relationship stuff that the first chapter gets into. So it kind of sets the tone of the novel as a science fiction novel and promises that we will get there eventually.
And in addition to setting the tone in this particular scene, it was also, here is how time travel was discovered. It's the origin story of how the idea of finding this biological artifact turned into the time travel that we end up getting introduced to later in chapter 1. So it was important for that reason as well. But we were talking about that, and I'm still stuck in our conversation just a few minutes ago. And we were trying to figure out, what do we give the viewers as a result of this? It's not enough to just say, yeah, we've been stuck. So, Nathan, what was it that you asked me?
I asked you, how do you intend to get unstuck?
And I paused and looked at him and I said, that's a really good question. Helping people get unstuck with things, that's what I do as a coach. That's part of the role that I play. And what I do is let them tell me about the situation that they're facing. And then I get to ask the curious questions, the dumb questions that come without being inside the scenario, being able to read the label on the outside of the bottle. Often the problem is people spend so much time inside the bottle they can't read the label. So I decided, let me pretend. What would I say to somebody if they came to me, if a client came to me with this same problem? what would I ask? And so I sat turning in my chair, asking a series of questions to Nathan's amusement, I suppose. And I asked, what is it about this particular sticking point that makes it important to resolve it more than anything else before you move on? And I turned in my chair and I said, well, this right now, it's the whole premise on which we're building the model of time travel. If this doesn't work, either it doesn't work in the world or it doesn't work from a storytelling perspective because it's too confusing, then we may have to revisit the entire premise of the story. We talked earlier about the bones not fitting together. We've got to get this skeleton working. And it's part of this point is one of the key anchors of that overall story that the characters' stories are built on. So then I turned in my chair again and I asked myself, when you look at the whole incomplete skeleton, what percentage of the disconnectedness does this particular point make up? And that's about the point of time where I tried to recruit Nathan. I'm not really sure. What percentage do you think it would be? And then you came back with...
Well, yeah, I was trying to figure out the answer to that question, and I was having trouble answering that, so I asked the follow-up that would kind of hopefully help us get to the answer there, which was, what are the specific parts of the story that depend on this particular element? And the other example that we came up with was a scene that we had once considered actually having as the prologue, because it includes this element right here. And this is actually one that I had written before, and I think I looked up before. I think it's episode 16, if you want to go back and watch that one when you're done here, that we talk about that scene. But its purpose was to communicate the detail of the experience a person has who is making a change to the past and then experiencing that change in real time, how it affects their present, because it affects the physical of the present immediately, but the mental kind of takes a while to catch up, and the memories are a little bit fuzzy, and it's like almost like deja vu, but not quite, and some interesting mental things that go on with that.
Right, and so that, realizing that change, the point that we're now saying is the point of our prologue is no longer to talk about how the science works, but it is to introduce what the experience is like for the person. The purpose of our prologue changed. So the challenge that I had been facing was the person was sitting there. They had a series of things that they needed to do as part of this experiment to be able to send the message back. But once they start that series, the first thing that they change in that series would change the world around them, and their memory would start catching up. And the experience of confusion throughout that process was getting in the way of telling the story of what they did to accomplish the goal. And as part of this conversation, no, that part of the story, that confusion, it's not getting in the way. It is the story. That is the purpose of the prologue. So that now became the whole substructure that we're building the prologue on. That is how we got unstuck.
How we got unstuck was asking ourselves the obvious questions, the dumb questions, why is this even important? Well, obviously it's important because of this and this. Well, why is that important? And eventually we got ourselves to the point where we realized that some of the assumptions, I guess, that we were basing things off of weren't exactly accurate, and that caused us to rethink the purpose of the scene to a point where we're telling the scene differently and in a way that's a whole lot easier.
Right, and I think more compelling to the whole purpose of the story, because it's about the internal experience, not the raw science. So that forcing ourselves to ask the questions out loud, answer the questions out loud, put words to them, it changed the perspective on the purpose of the scene. So the question for you is, when have you experienced a change of perspective that helped you get unstuck with your writing? Let us know in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.